All right, good evening, everyone. This is Talk the Ting, episode number 4. Tonight we have with us a special guest. This man, a lot of us in our age, we kind of grew up watching him on TV in Dominica. Um, he's taking his talents to other shores now, but we're gonna have a nice little conversation with him tonight. And no, we're gonna introduce him as none other but the man himself, Mr. Felix Augustine Jr.
How we doing, man? How we doing? How is everything? How you guys doing?
What's up, man? How are you doing?
All right. Do we know how you doing, man? Hadley, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. Thanks for accepting our invite to come on here and talk the thing.
Absolutely.
And before we continue, for those of you who've been there before, go ahead and have a drink with us. Whatever drink that you're having, water, alcohol, juice, it doesn't matter.
But I think we're having a drink. I think we should maybe make a toast to, I guess, to what's going on and to liberation and to freedom and to, Black Lives Matter and everything, right?
Sure, why not?
All
Toast.
right.
Cheers.
Toast, man. Cheers.
Although they say, Felix, when you toast with water, that's bad luck, you know.
So in this case, it's good. it's really good luck.
If you say so.
Put it this way, that's what I've always toasted with, and I don't think I've had that much bad luck. So
Right. So Felix, man, let's start off like this, right? So like I said in the small introduction I have with you,
absolutely.
of you.
Uh-huh.
Growing up, man, I always see you on GIS
Yeah.
and giving the news, and that was just one of those things, right? These was two things, GIS and mapping news we used to watch, right, back in the day.
Back in the day.
So, so tell us a little bit about yourself, going back, who's Felix, how did he get his start, in media, and, give us a little bit of a backstory of yourself.
Absolutely. So, for obvious reasons, Felix is a humble man from Dominica. Grew up in the communities of Daly's and Paybush, where my mom is from. My dad is from Daly's, so I kind of grew up in these two communities. Went to the Dominican Grammar School and found out when I was in about third form, going into fourth form, that I wanted to work in media and communications. And I'll give you the story of how it actually came to be. My class was tasked with doing the assembly one day, and my job in the group that was selected to lead the assembly was to read the scriptures. So I started reading the scriptures, and in the middle of my scripture reading, the entire student body decided or started to applaud. So I found that kind of odd, and I was, trying to figure out like what was going on. So I went back to my desk, and I told my buddy, McDonald Fontaine, and big up to McDonald Fontaine back in Dominica. I said, hey, I just found out what I'm gonna do in life. And he says, well, what are you talking about? I said, well, did you not hear the crowd and the student body? So he says, well, yeah, but how does that? I said, well, look, I am going to communicate. And that's what I think my calling is. I don't know, because I hadn't finished reading the scriptures. I was just reading, ordinarily, and that was it. And then I decided from then on that everything that I did in school-wise was going to lead me to that eventuality, because I knew that is what I was going to do. So I became a sponge for knowledge. At the time, I didn't exactly know what that was going to entail, what communication was going to entail, where it was going to lead me, what kind of form of communication, because back then, in Dominica, when you speak about communication, you speak about the New Chronicle, you speak about DBS radio, very few forms of media. So at the time, that's what I thought it was going to entail, just communication. And so after graduating, I think I graduated like on a Friday. On Monday morning, I was in front of the New Chronicle newspaper. I went to Anthony White and I said, I'd like to I'd like a job with you. And then Mr. White says, we don't have any vacancies. So I said, well, that's fine. I'm going to work for you for free. And so I started working at first of all, he was a little hesitant. He says, well, can you write? I said, look, I in my mind, I believe that I can, because everything that I've done for the past couple of years, I think is leading me to where we are right now. So he's looking at me, at this little kid in front of him, and he's like, what are you talking about? So he gave me an article, and he says, well, go home and write something. Lennox Linton was my neighbor at the time, and I went over by Lennox, and I says, hey, I got to write an article. So we had a conversation, and then I went in and I wrote the article, and then the next day I went back to him, and then he says, well, if you want to work and you're not going to get paid and stuff like that, I said, that's fine. So I started working at the New Chronicle, not getting paid, not getting any kind of money, so on that very same day, I had gone over to DBS Radio, because I was just looking at all forms, and I spoke to Mr. Judge John at the time, who was the general manager of DBS Radio, and he gave me pretty much the same assignment. And so, because Mr. White of the Chronicle had told me yes first, I decided to go over to the Chronicle to work. So I started working there. So in maybe about a month or so, maybe less, I think it might have been less, my story started to hit the front page of the newspaper, and I was starting to make a name for myself on the newspaper. So DBS Radio now calls me back and says, hey, are you still interested? So I went back to Mr. White and I say, hey, Mr. White, DBS is calling me and asking me if I want to come over and work for them. And I'm not making any money here, and it's still in communications. It's still what I want to do. So I'm thinking of going and entertaining their conversation. So Mr. White says, well, come back and talk to me in the afternoon. When I went back to talk to Mr. White in the afternoon, he gave me a letter of appointment, and I was appointed as a news reporter at the New Chronicle after spending maybe about a month, 2 months at the Chronicle. Usually you have to stay 6 months of apprenticeship, but that was cut short because, obviously they felt that I was doing enough work. And so I came directly from high school, like I said, and went to work at Chronicle. Don't have any experience, nothing. I learned a lot on the job from people like Paula Warner, Jared Burton, and all these people who worked at Chronicle at the time. And they held my hands, and, Marion and stuff like that. And, they helped me become a reporter. And I think I became a pretty decent reporter at the time. So while I was going through all of this communication stuff, I still felt that I wanted to know a whole lot more about the other forms of communication that there was in Dominica, and I wanted to experience that. And so I started going around the GIS guys and the electronic forms of media. And it's an interesting story. One day, Harry Royer, who worked over at GIS at the time, he had an assignment that he needed somebody to go shoot. And he asked me if I could take the camera with me because I was a news reporter working at the Chronicle. And he says, well, hey, why don't you take the camera and you can shoot something for me? I says, hey, I've never done video before. I've always done little stills, but I've never done video, so I don't know whatever. So when I went and I shot it, and then he says, well, hey, man, did you shoot this? I said, yeah, I shot it. And then he was surprised. So then he says, well, you can come back around. So I came there very often. And at some point, I started talking to, at the time it was Eugenia Charles and Dermot Southwell and some other folks about trying to get me into GIS with Cecil Shillingford and these guys. And then so they had me come in periodically, and I would stand at the back and look at how people were reading the news at the time. Raymond Lawrence, Adina Bella Valentine now. These were the people who were reading news on TV. And so I would just stand back and just look at how they were doing. In the evening, I'll come back into GIS, I would take a tape, and I would put in the machine, and then I would just sit on the desk and try reading and practicing reading and stuff like that. And eventually one day, one of them couldn't come in to read the news, and they said, well, hey, do you want to do it? And I read the news, and I just never stopped.
Okay.
That was the GIS story.
Okay, man, you give us a lot.
Yeah.
In answering the who is Felix
Right.
question.
Since to get to the GIS.
Yeah.
Well, listen, off that intro alone, we could just do the whole interview.
Yeah. Yeah. So
yeah, go ahead.
This thing that I don't want to miss is again, like, we do this thing to empower others, to have people learn from what people before them have done, how they did it, how do they get there. And there's one thing that I get from this entire little introduction that you gave of yourself is self-confidence. Self-confidence is something that we doubt that we even have a little bit in us. And even when we know that we're worth something, we still just, again, doubt. What do you think what did you see in yourself before everybody else seen, apart from that time when people were clapping and people were happy with what you did? What else did you see in yourself that said, yo, I'm going to do that, and even if I have no experience, and even if they're not going to offer me $1, I'm going to do it? Because basically you just took yourself with no experience and you became something that was in demand almost in like 2 to 3 months.
Right.
So what did you see in yourself that pushed you to say, yo, I'm confident, I can do this with or with no experience?
Well, I'll tell you, the one thing I felt at the time that I had going for me is that day that I found out that is what I wanted to do, right? That day gave me a lot of confidence. And I'll tell you how we did that.
And you say you were in high school at the time, right? So you were talking about what, 16, 17 years old?
Yeah, I was in grammar school. And so because I knew what I wanted to do, right? Like I said, everything that I did was towards that eventuality. And I'll give you examples. So for instance, when I watched TV, even at my naive little 16, 17 years old, I didn't look at TV like an ordinary person. I looked at it like, how did they make that TV, right? Mm. And so when I read the newspaper like, how did they come up with that story? Like, who, where, why, when? Like, how did they write that story? So that in itself, because I knew all of those little intricacies, it gave me confidence that I could do it myself because I studied it, even if I wasn't doing it in a formal setting. So once I went into the whole conversation with Mr. White about getting a job, I already knew a lot of how to formulate that story. I didn't have the experience or the exact know-how, but in theory, in my mind, I knew. So that gave me the confidence to have that level of conversation because anything he threw at me, I could answer because I was studying it on my own, right?
Right. So there was one thing that kind of stood out to me in what you said at first, though, with, like for instance, a lot of younger people graduate college or high school, whatever, and they still kind of iffy on what they want to do. Yeah. They're not really sure. Yeah. I mean, you kind of figured out at that age, okay, I'm interested in media. It really doesn't matter if it's video, if it's audio, if it's written media. I'm just interested in that. Exactly. But one key thing in there was you were willing to work for free.
Yep.
Right? And that is a thing that I think a lot of times that people underestimate, that you put yourself in certain positions and you prove yourself, right? And like you said, you got to a point where 2 months in, you said, Mr. White, when another offer came, he was like, yo, I can't let you go. You know what I'm saying? So I think that is one thing that, for younger people, that we have to not just jump over that, right?
The thing that I always say, right? And I gave that example recently, and I've given it in a talk that I've had with students. I think it is always very important to know what your destination is, right? And I'll break it down even further for you. Let's say, for instance, right, that you go into Portsmouth, right? All of us know where Portsmouth is. We know that that's where we want to go, right? Now, on our way to Portsmouth, we might get to, say, for instance, Maho. There might be some roadblocks, as there usually is, right? So
in Maho for sure.
So you might have to be in Maho for a minute, right? Trying to figure out how do you continue to go to Portsmouth. When you get to, now that may require that you spend a night in Maho. Again, we're dealing in theory there. We don't necessarily, that's not going to happen. But it may require that you spend a night in Maho. But then when that night is over, you have to tell yourself that I'm not in Maho yet, so I still got to go, right? So you get to St. Joseph, for instance, and the Layu Bridge is washed away.
So no. Hold on. I'll stop you right there. Because I know you were involved in the Layu River coverage, yes, right? Sir. So I let's not forget that. We will come back to that. Okay. But anyway, continue.
So you get to Layu, and now you can't cross, right? So now it may require that you go back and go through the interior, go for another route to try to get to Maui, because sometimes, and again, I'm still giving you the analogy, right? Sometimes going forward means going back. But at the end of all of that, when you're going back, you still have to tell yourself that I am not yet at Portsmouth. So no matter what is happening, you have to tell yourself that I'm not yet at Portsmouth. So that's the mentality that I had. I knew where I wanted to go. So no matter what was happening at the time, I knew that no matter what it was, I'm not there. I gotta keep going because I want to become. I want to work in media, because at the time I even felt like maybe media was social worker or something like that. But what I knew at the time is that it involved talking to people, because that day when I started to talk to these people, and it was more than just my immediate core, it was a whole group, it was the whole audience. Everybody seemed to understood exactly what it is that I was saying. And I wanted that feeling. The other thing that happened to me as well is one day I was looking at news and I saw this reporter. No, I'd actually gone to an event and I saw this reporter at the event. And then when I went home, I looked at TV and I saw the report. And it suddenly hit me that that reporter was the most, that person was the strongest person on the planet, the most important person on the planet. And I'll tell you why. It hit me. That person was the most powerful person on the planet. Because although I was at the event, right, the view that I formulated was the view that the reporter gave me. So the people that he took, the pictures that he took from that event were the people that I was exposed to. The people, the voices and the sounds that he took from the event were those that he felt that I should hear. Everything that he felt that I should hear from the event was what he was giving me. And I felt, who else on this earth has that level of power? And I wanted to have that kind of power too, because just think about it. Right now, if you look at CNN, you're seeing the world through the eyes of the reporter. A lot of other things might have happened. Yep. But the reporter feels that that statement that somebody made is the one that they're going to take and make it and give it a certain level of prominence. Who does that? And that's what I felt I was intoxicated with, because that was so powerful. Now, a lot of people never think about it like that. But again, in my little naive mind, I just couldn't understand how that person had that level of power to take a whole hour, 2-hour event and condense it into literally just a couple minutes, 5 minutes.
Right. So,
and it shaped the entire, it shaped my entire belief.
So basically, what I'm getting from you is something that I used to tell my students a lot, especially my third form students is...
Your students?
We'll get to that.
We get these students.
My third form students is one thing I used to tell them was, this is a very good time to start thinking of what you want to be and going for it. Don't like, opportunities will come, but basically what you're telling me there is you saw something, you liked something, you were interested in that thing, and you told yourself that that's what I want to be. And you didn't just tell that to yourself, you went for it. Another thing that you said that I'm getting from what you're saying is pretty much how powerful you can be. And I'm not saying how powerful you can be, but how powerful anybody can be in any position that they are in, you know? And but let's move on. So you went from the Chronicle, DBS wanted you, and then you ended up at GIS. But we knew how you got to GIS, so we reached out to a few people you worked with. Yeah, we do our research. We don't just come here and just talk. We do our research. And while you said that you had your mentorship from whoever it was and your neighbor, Mr. Linton, helped you, but we also found out that you didn't just stop there when you got there. You took it up on your own to help people get to where you were. Some maybe got even further, some maybe just got there. But you going through all the struggles on your own, pushing yourself in the door, and you ended up being somebody to pull somebody through that door. How, some people might say, but that's unfair, but how did it feel to be now that person who is helping people come in and, you know, like mentoring people in what you do because they want to do it too? How did that come about, and how did you go about doing it? And then how did it feel?
Well, here's the deal. I feel, and sometimes I go back a little bit because, like I said, that shaped me a lot and that influenced a lot of how I did a lot of things. But because I had found out that early, and it had such a profound impact on me and made life so easy for me, I wanted other people to feel that as well. And so if somebody came to me and they showed any level of interest in anything that I was doing, I would go out of my way to try and help them to get into that as well, because I understand what it is to not have focus or to not be able to decide what it is. So I would help anybody to get into that. So, I mean, I like to think that I'm a selfless person. Again, I don't like to even necessarily talk about myself like that. I prefer let somebody else say it. But a lot of times I don't necessarily think about me, man. I think about, we all we are all on this planet for a greater good. And some of us, like they sometimes say, not all superheroes wear a cape. Some of us would do, do a whole bunch of different things. And so that usually is the way that I think about stuff, man. It's not about me. It's just trying to help else.
So with that said, right, I mean, just maybe closing off on this segment.
Absolutely.
What do you think we should do in Dominica? Do you think that we should implement, or something should be implemented? Because for you, right, you came across a situation where you read this thing and the reception you got, you loved it, and you instantly realized, like, man, I want to be involved in that.
Right.
But what about, the younger kid who maybe is not as confident as you were at the time, right? Who maybe wants to pursue that, but they don't have the confidence to go to a Mr. White and say, hey, I want a job here. I want to do this. I want to do that. Do you think that should be something that should be implemented, in part of the curriculum, for younger kids in terms of, career development and, that kind of stuff?
Absolutely, 100%. I think somebody asked me the other day, what are one of my, what was kind of like a setback growing up and stuff like that. And what I think we lack in Dominica is a lot of career guidance, right? And a lot of times, I'll explain that to you and I'll break it down even further. So let's say, for instance, you want to be an attorney in Dominica. At the time, there are only but a couple of attorney disciplines that you would think about. You think about either criminal, family, and maybe, I don't even know, business. But at the time, you wouldn't even necessarily think of business. There were just a very few types of attorneys. But right now, as you and I know, there are a gazillion different types of attorneys. So in a Dominica setting, I think a lot of times when we guiding, instead of guiding, say for instance, you want to become a nurse, you don't necessarily just have to become that kind of nurse. There are so many different types of nurse types that you can become. And so that is the kind of guidance that I think that they should help those kids. But it comes with exposing them to a whole bunch of different disciplines. And so that I think is, it's a very good point that you made. And I think people could benefit and kids could benefit by just being exposed to the variety of disciplines that there are. Like, remember when you're growing up, if you're not doing well in school, your mom says, well, you're going to plant fig. There's nothing wrong with planting fig. But the thing is, become a farmer and work hard. But at the time, it was only fig that they were telling you.
All right, not grapefruit, not lime, not none of that.
That's fig.
Fig.
It's just fig this, but there could be so many other things that you could be planting. So again, even when we think of farming in Dominica, again, now obviously with the move to diversify, it has become a little bit more mainstream for some other things. But there's so many different types of agriculture type that you could be doing. You understand what I was saying?
I remember that it was a hurricane song, I think. Diversify, Mr. Farmer, I think.
Mr. Farmer.
I was young, but I remember that song, man.
Absolutely. But again, you get the point. It's like, when we talking to kids about what they can be, don't limit it. If they have a certain, dispensation to do something, nurture it. Like maybe, and that's what I did with myself, and I again, I just like to help other people do it.
So with that said, you talked about, diversifying and being exposed to many different, I guess, facets, right?
Mm-hmm.
So eventually you got to the point where you moved to the US, right?
Yep.
So how was that transition, right? How was that transition from, being, somebody in Dominica who, was well known and stuff, and then you come up here and then trying to still get into the same space that you were in Dominica, trying to move into that same space in the US?
Well, I'll tell you, moving here from Dominica, and at the time it was moving here to go to school, was one of the most humbling things that I've ever had to do. And I'll explain that again to you. I moved from Dominica and I went to upstate New York. I went to Plattsburgh. And I'm moving, like you said, rightly so, from a place where, most people on the island knew who I was, to a place where absolutely nobody knows who I am. And I'm walking on campus, walking anywhere, and there's no, hey, Felix, there's no nothing. You're just nobody. You're just literally just a number. And so I remember one day when I got there, the first day on campus, I went to my dorm, and when I saw the size of my room, I was like, yo, is this what I'm gonna have to spend the next 3 years? Really? And so I took a walk around campus and I started to talk to myself and told myself, hey, don't forget what you're here to do, man. Because all you need is a piece of paper that says that you're certified to do what it is that you're here to do. Because you know this thing already. Don't forget it. And so what also happened is later that day, I had my roommate showed up, and my roommate name was Wilson Lando, right? He died, God bless his soul, a couple of years ago. And when he walked into the room, he saw that I was his roommate. Man, this guy started to jump. He started to jump. No, I don't know this guy from Adams, but he knew me, right? And he was from Dominica.
Oh, really? Wow.
Lando.
Yeah. He gets on his phone and he calls his mom. And he says, hey, you don't know who's my roommate? And my roommate is Felix Augustine Jr. Wow. And this guy is the happiest person on the planet because I am his roommate, and he feels that he knows me because he spends so much time looking at me and stuff like that. Again, I don't know this guy from Adams. So that it humbled me. And I felt at the time that, hey, as much as this guy is gonna be depending on me, I'm going to make a life out of this thing. And so that settled me. So it was a little bit of a transition, but one of the things that I felt that I did that was great, and Plattsburgh worked out pretty nice, was when I moved from Dominica and I went to Plattsburgh. Plattsburgh reminded me a lot of ways of kind of like Dominica, same kind of topography, the rivers and the mountains and stuff like that. The only thing is it was really, really cold.
Right.
Really, really cold, but it was kind. So I didn't miss a lot of things about Dominica in terms of, the environment necessarily. But I was in a pretty good place. I think I was a mature student at that point. So I knew exactly what it is that I was there to do. And I just fell in line and just, got into doing it. I got involved in a lot of stuff on campus. I got involved in the student association. I was working in the fitness center. I was a fitness instructor. I worked in the theater department. A bunch of different things. I worked in the school television station. I managed a television station. I was a host on TV over there. So, I really just immersed myself into the whole school culture and into everything about it. And so it took away a lot of the extra thought of thinking about other things. And so that's kind of how I made it work for me.
Okay. So you keep mentioning Plattsburgh and campus, and you haven't said, you've alluded to it, but you haven't said what you're doing there. So you left back home where you got out of high school. You didn't even go to college then, I'm guessing.
No, I did not.
And you were this big, popular guy, superstar, disseminating information to the people. You have this guy crazy excited because you are his roommate. But then that wasn't enough for you. You saw the importance of getting that extra qualification, going to school. So, quick answer. What did you go to school for? Your formal education, what is it in?
So I have my bachelor's degree in mass media communications. Again, I just felt I needed a piece of paper to validate that is what that I could do it. And again, I know you said quick, but I'm going to give you a quick story how this all even came to be. So when the World Creole Music Festival was starting up, a guy who worked, he was a Jamaican guy, very good friend of mine to this date. Name is Dave Rodney. He came to Dominica and he attended an event where I was working. I was covering a story leading up to the World Creole Music Festival. And so that night, when he went to his hotel room, he saw the GIS news. And then at the end of the news, he saw the credits. And then he saw that I was the reporter. I was the camera person. He saw that I was presenting the news. A lot of the credits had my name in there. So the following day, he called me and he says, "Hey, man, I've been working in this media thing for a very long time. I live in New York, and I have never seen this in my life, that somebody doing so many things, in the news." And then he says, "Well, why don't you come to New York?" So I told him, "Well, at the time, I don't have any visa. I don't have anything to go to New York." So anyways, so I'm going to fast forward a little bit. And then, so in 2000, a friend of mine was selecting 2 people from every country in the world to attend the Millennium celebrations in Chicago. And so I was one person and the other person was Kamala John Baptist. And after I attended the Millennium celebrations in 2000, I went over to New York, and then he took me across to MTV, and he introduced me to the senior vice president over at MTV. And at the time, I was trying to see if I could get a job.
Pause.
Yep.
We're the ones leading that race. You're not.
Sorry, but go ahead. Go ahead.
Go back to education.
Right.
So you have that degree in education.
Correct.
And you now you're talking about New York.
Mhm.
And for those of you who don't know, this guy has worked with a few of the largest media corporations in the United States that we watch on TV, like MTV Networks in New York, BET, Centric. This guy has been part a few years of the production of the BET annual BET Awards. This guy came from Dominica.
Yep.
How did you get into these doors? Because it's not one door, because these are different corporations. They might be doing the same thing, but you basically had the opportunity to work with almost every one of them. So coming from, basically, I guess that's in you because you did the same thing back home, you know, so you're still in demand, even coming to the United States. How did that come to existence?
I'll continue it where I stopped earlier, just a minute ago. So in 2000, when I came to New York, my friend Dave Rodney brought me over to MTV, and he introduced me to a lady over there who was the senior vice president of MTV. And so we had a conversation, and here I was, this little naive guy from Dominica, telling this senior vice president of MTV that, you know, how I felt about their programming, how I felt about certain shows, what I felt would happen to some of the shows. And then so she was, I think, you know, she was like, what's up with this guy? So she had me look around, and then she's, after a couple hours of having conversation, she says, well, there isn't much that I can do for you at the moment because you don't have a green card. You're not in school. I can't give you an internship. There is nothing that I can really do for you at the time. So, so she says, well, if their situation ever changes, then maybe I can help. Well, I don't know who told her to say that. Dominica. And I sent this lady an email almost every month for 2 years, right?
Just to make sure that she doesn't forget you, right?
She doesn't forget me. So that's in 2000. So in 2002, I left Dominica. I sent an email saying, remember, I'm leaving Dominica and I'm going to go to study. So I went up to Plattsburgh. I did my degree in 3 years. It's a 4-year degree. I did it in 3 years. I didn't go to a summer class. I didn't go, nothing. I was doing just a gazillion number of credits. I finished the entire course in 3 years. And on the 1 week before graduation, I sent her an email and I says, hey, my graduation is on the 14th of May, and we need to talk because I remember what you said. So she responded and she says, hey, you know, there is nothing that I will not do to ensure that I get you a spot. I mean, yo, man, like, you have no idea. I cried, man, because this thing was just, it was a lot, because I knew what I wanted and I was working towards it. I didn't want her to forget about me, you know? And so I came down to New York. I took 1 day off from school. That's the only time I missed a single day in school in my 3 years. I took a day off to come to New York, and I went around to certain departments that she had pointed out, and I interviewed with all of them, and the music events and specials department is where I landed. And that department is the department that does the MTV Music Awards, the MTV Awards, and all of MTV's in-house programming. We did a lot of any kind of live event that you saw at the time. We were the ones doing it. We did Live 8 in Philly. We did all of the Unplugged albums. I worked with Alicia Keys Unplugged.
Man, that's one of my favorite albums, man.
The Alicia
I love
Keys
it.
Unplugged. We did that BAM in Brooklyn. You know, those were experiences. And I mean, again, a lot of times I would pinch myself when I'm, you know, next to these people, and I'm like, you know, hey, man, I'm nobody from Dominica, you know? And again, I'm not saying this to be, you know, so nobody don't send me any kind of weird text or anything like that. But you know, I'm saying, like, you know, I'm coming from a country that nobody knows.
Nobody knows, right?
Nobody knows, and you know, and I'm rubbing shoulders with all of these people and doing some of these amazing things, you know, and stuff like that. But it was because of a lot of it was because of I was just persistent in trying to get there.
I was gonna say, man. I was gonna say throughout your whole story, man. All I keep hearing is persistence, man.
That's
It just sounds like you just won't give up, and
Um,
and that's one thing. You know, like you said, you know, we go into Portsmouth, but no matter what happened, until you get to Portsmouth, like you know, you keep going, and that's a big, you know, big deal. You know,
you have to
push
keep
through.
Yeah, I don't know if you want me to go into the BET, how the BET came to be. Or,
Yeah.
Yeah, man.
Tell us a little
Yeah,
bit
yeah.
about BET.
so after I had spent about a year, almost a year at MTV, there was a situation where there was MTV was doing was getting involved into Caribbean music, and so the same vice president told me that I should reach out to the guy at the time who was going to be running that Caribbean network, and at the time it was Temple. And so I went and I interviewed with the guy, and the guy says to me that, you know, no, he told me he'll call me. He didn't call me, right? So about a month went by, nothing and stuff like that. I didn't get the job. Obviously, I didn't get the job because, you know, nothing was happening. Anyways, he eventually did call me. And he says to me at the time that, although you interviewed for Temple, I didn't want you for Temple. I wanted you for myself because I was going to develop a situation and I'd like you to come work with me. And then so he and I started a situation in New York where we were producing shows for BETJ at the time. I don't know if you guys remember BETJ. It was BET, and then it was BET Jazz, right? But then they felt that the jazz was a little bit too pigeonholed because obviously if it's jazz, it's only going to be jazz.
Oh, jazz, right?
Jazz music, yeah. Limits it.
So they took out the jazz and just made it J. And then so he and I opened a little office in New York on 23rd Street. And we were doing little shows for BET. And then we started to make a lot of noise with the shows that we were doing. And eventually they gave us more shows, right? And then we started to expand and get more people. And then eventually the shows that we were doing brought us, you know, into the mainstream. And then so BETJ became Centric, and Centric is obviously part of BET. And so now they opened up offices for us in New York, and then we became part of mainstream BET, and you know, working on a whole bunch of the BET awards and you know the Soul Train Awards and all of these shows that I managed at the time as well. So that's how I ended up into the whole BET family, and I spent 10 years at BET in charge of all of BET's in-house productions out of New York.
Oh, so with that said, right, and with your backstory of perseverance and persistence and not giving up and you know all that stuff, right? So now I do know that you know how like Hadley said, we do our research, right? We do know that you know you currently work for yourself, right? So how did all of that experience, right, get you to the point where you said, you know what, you know, I feel like now I need to take another step where now I could go into business for myself.
Okay, so it was a couple of years ago when the economy had a downturn, and so BET was laying off. BET laid off about I don't know, at the time might have been about 200 of us and stuff like that, or whatever it was, a whole bunch of us at the time. And so I was trying to figure out, you know, what is it that I can do from here on. Now I had a whole bunch of, you know, interests and stuff like that, and I had always been working all my life pretty much. And so I just kind of wanted a situation where I had a little bit of flexibility. I had a little bit of time to pursue some of my interests. And I just always remember that ever since I picked up a camera, I was, you know, I felt I could take pictures. You know, I took a lot of pictures when I was at Chronicle. And again, I was never trained in photography. I never went to school for photography, nothing. And so after BET, a friend of mine had a couple of cameras, Kendra, and she says, hey, you know, why don't you use one of my cameras? And and try something, you know. And then I went and I took her cameras, and then I went to YouTube University. Boom. But those
Yeah,
of
man.
for those of us who know that's, you know,
Yeah.
YouTube University. And again, I have not been to school a single day for photography or anything like that. I did communications in school, right? And so that's how I started. I just picked up a camera and started to shoot. And then eventually, a lot of the people who saw my work gravitated towards it. A lot of celebrities loved the fact that, you know, I was able to, you know, to do some pretty decent work. And so they kept calling and they kept asking me to do stuff for them. Then I started traveling, you know, people overseas saw what I was doing. I went to South Africa a couple times. I met the president of South Africa, you know, but one of my biggest highlights, you know, even in photography, is something that never happened. And my highlight was being chosen by Nelson Mandela's family to do a coffee book for him. And it never happened because right at that time was when he fell sick. And then we never was able to pull it. And obviously he subsequently died. But that was the highlight of my life, was something that never happened.
You know what I would do? I'd still put that on my resume.
I was contacted.
Yo, just the idea of you being thought of and they consider you. Like at that point, we know he passed, so it's not like he considered you and then he changed his mind. You did it, bro. So
yeah, go ahead.
We're gonna transition into something that we've noticed about you. Like I said, like we've been planning the show for a while, so we've been targeting certain people and doing research on them. And something outside of I wouldn't say it's totally outside, but it's kind of outside. What you do is, we've noticed that you have that little urge to being an activist. And not just in Dominica. Like I see it in Dominica, you always comment on Facebook about, you know, and I don't want to get into politics, but
politics, but yeah, it's fine. Go ahead.
Yeah, I've seen you, you know, you on your activism politics and you calling for, you know, free press, freedom of speech and stuff like that. And then in recent times, and Dwayne, you're gonna hit him up with the next part of this after he answers. But in recent times, even with this whole Black Lives Matter thing that's been going on, we've been seeing you very active in protest, and not just in protest, but you document them. And I think that's very important. So can you talk about the activism part of you? I don't want to talk about the recent accolade that you just got. We'll move into that. But why are you so interested in being a voice?
Because I feel that somebody has to help, or somebody has to speak for the persons who cannot speak, for the marginalized. Somebody has to do it. Now, I explained it earlier, not in this conversation, but I was having a conversation with somebody, and some people are very loud. You can go into a rally, you can make a lot of noise, you can scream, you can shout. I'm not a very loud person necessarily, but I think all of us have some sort of part to play in whatever kind of struggle that that's going on. And with me, I'll take a Dominica context, for instance. I know, for instance, maybe not so much because a lot of the younger people don't maybe necessarily know me as much, but I know at the time that my name had currency, right? So people always gravitated towards either things that I posted, things that I said, or whatever. So I felt that at the time that if I am the one saying it, it may not necessarily bring about that particular change, but it may get somebody to stop and think about it because it's coming from somebody that they trust. And so that's why I felt that at the time I needed to use my voice as currency to try to bring about whatever it was that it is, you know, again, like I said, the change may not happen, but at least I'm vocalizing how I feel about
Yep.
If it may impact on somebody the way that I feel, then it's good. One person, two people, it's all good. And so that's why I've always gotten involved. And I mean, I like it because I don't think that we live in an isolated world. You understand what I'm saying? We all live in this community. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times you speak to people and they say, hey, I'm not involved in this, or I don't care about this, or this doesn't affect me, or stuff like that. But the reason I'm saying this is because they've not been shown how it affects them. And sometimes it's in ways that you don't think about. And it may not affect you now, but it is going to affect you at some point. And it could be for the good or for the bad, but at some point it's going to affect you. And, after a while too, you get to the point where, I'm not sure where you guys are in life, but you have kids, and it stopped being about you, but it starts being about what are you doing for the next set of people? You understand what I'm saying? I'm not 100 years old, but at some point, those next set of people are going to become the most important factors in our world. But it helps that at this particular time, we do everything that we can to ensure that their world is much better than the one that we're going to leave for them. So, I want my sons to have a better life. I want my daughters to have a better life and not have to go through some of the struggles that you and I had to go through. So when I speak, it's out of that. And again, I just have an opinion, and I'd like to share it. And if you notice, I don't argue with anybody on Facebook. You don't see me in no fights. I'm not arguing. I've shared my opinion. What is yours? That's it. Half the times, this is my opinion. What is yours? And that's it. This is your opinion. Okay, well, let's have a conversation. If you're open for us to have a conversation, then we'll have a conversation and we'll talk. And then maybe you could persuade me or I could persuade you. That's what communication is. That's what it is. And that sort of level of civility is what I like. So very, very rarely do you ever see me on Facebook having a fight with anybody. I'll always be the one to say, okay, all right, I got you.
That's it, right?
Yeah.
But I have to say, man, I mean, I've thoroughly enjoyed the conversation, but I have to say I'm disappointed over the one thing, Felix. One thing I'm disappointed, man.
What are you disappointed in, man? I'm sorry.
You don't have the vest on tonight, man.
Oh my God. So, man, here's the deal. So it was a bit of a change because here it is, right? You guys never see me with hair. I got hair, man. This is COVID here. So I got hair. I got everything. I got some glasses on. So I figured change it up wholesale. It couldn't be like, but yeah, I'll send you a picture with the vest on, man. It's going to be because
yeah, man.
It's all in just trying to be you, just trying to be different. Even when I left Dominica, I came here. I did the same thing. We like a lot of times to lose our individuality, and that's what makes us people. You have to have your individuality, and again, that's just my style. Some people like it, some people don't. It matters not.
Nah, man. Well, I could tell you, man. I mean, listen. Every time if I see a picture and you ain't got a vest, I say something wrong in your life, boy.
No, man. I'm all right, but it's just me, man. Just being me, individual. Mm-hmm.
So we talked about one more thing. We talked about the Layu River incident.
Yeah.
Let's just go back to that a little bit because even for me, right? I mean, I'm in my I guess you could say early to mid 30s. I remember seeing the Layu River green.
Uh-huh.
Like I remember I used to go to these summer camps, like we go to ITSS and these places. I remember going to Layu River, and if you couldn't swim, you couldn't walk in that river. I remember that river being deep.
Uh-huh.
And then I remember the incident happening. I was young at the time, obviously, but can you like give us a little walkthrough of that and like, what was that experience like?
So one day I'm sitting at GIS and we get a call that there is a series of landslides happening up in the Layu area, Kahome or whatever that area is above there anyways, where that big dam is now. So there's a series of landslides. So, took my camera And we went, brother me and myself, and Franklin Moses. I don't think Franklin came at that particular trip, but it was brother me and myself. And we went to that, and I remember going on the edge of that landslide in the Cajon Park, right? And I am looking at the earth having big separations, like when you have an earthquake, like it's just a whole big chunk of earth that's just waiting to go. But when I went, I didn't see it. But on my way back, I saw it. And I was like, yo, did I just go on the edge where? So anyways, shit. I went back to this place because we were continuing to cover the story. Man, a lot of the places that we walked and was looking at that landslide wasn't there anymore. It disappeared. And I mean, we felt like we were the luckiest people on the planet. It gave me a good lesson in life. And anyways, so we kept covering that story and stuff like that. And then one day, a guy called us who was monitoring the dam at the time, and he says, hey, guys, this thing looks like it's going to break. So Franklin Moses, brother me, Anthony Richards, and myself, we picked up a camera and we went up to Layu to see what was going to happen with this dam. We walked across to the dam a couple times, but we wanted to see. So they told us it was going to break. So we waited down Layu area, right, in strategic areas, and we looked at the dam break. We looked at water leaving that dam and coming down to Layu with the most ferocious activity that you'll ever see in your life, taking everything in its path. We would drive down like with literally speed, see clear water, and then in like couple seconds, we would just hear the rumble. Wow. Rocks and everything coming down, man. And then so I'll tell you, to this date, I still believe that experience and those days that I shot and reported on Layu was some of the best work that I've ever did with people like Franklin Moses. I think Franklin Moses is a genius because I just remember being at the back of that camera and I'll just tell Franklin, just go. And Franklin, I don't know where he would get the words. I don't know where he would get anything that he was saying. It was just magic. And to this day, it still is among some of the best work that I've ever done in Dominica, that Layu project, man, because it was devastation. It was for real with all of that sod and all of that mud that came down, man. And it was some time in Dominica for sure.
Okay, so we've gotten to the point where we wrap up, but I'm just going to mention something. You don't have to comment on it, but just to put this out there that, again, like I said, you don't just attend those rallies or protests, you document them, and some of your work has been taken up by one of the world's biggest galleries. And if you want to check it out, anybody, you could check on United Art Gallery and you'll see some of Felix's recent work on the ongoing protest of the killing of Mr. George Floyd. May his soul rest in peace. So you could just check that out. But we want to thank you, Felix, for coming on here, for accepting our invite. We want to thank you for, the little back and forth, little test run that we had to make sure that everything was great. You have things to do, you work for yourself, and you found time to do that with us. We also want to thank our viewers. Without you, this program is impossible, even if we hit the live button and we talk for 1 hour straight. Without you, this can't happen. So we want to thank you, those who've been there 4 episodes in a row. Those who've been there for the first episode, we want to say thank you, guys. Thank you, guys. And before I leave, I'm going to let you know, next week, Wednesday, we have the queen of bouillon music, the one who is bringing you all the therapy that we so rightly need right now in this COVID-19 times. and this Black Lives Matter stay inside thing. Colin XP will be with us next week. Okay? The two-time Booyah Monarch, the reigning groovy soca monarch of Dominica, will be with us to bring some of that therapy and some of that music with us next week. So tune in next week, Wednesday, same time, 8 p.m. Eastern time. And for those of you who are in a different time zone, it's okay. You could always catch our videos back on our Facebook page. And we are working on getting those videos edited and placed also on our YouTube channel. Quick note, follow us on Instagram at TalkTheTingDA. Check that out. Check us out on Instagram so you could get our little snips of our past videos and follow us. Don't just watch our videos, follow us here on Facebook. And thank you guys and see you all next week.
Good night, folks.
Thank you. Good night. Thank you.
Good night.